Hey everybody, welcome back. Back here, Josh Collacchi on Roto Curve, and what a great All Star break! Came at a perfect time, lets everybody recharge a little bit and get right back into the daily fantasy grind. The All Star break was another good one. I got to say, the MLB really stepped it up with the Home Run Derby. They did a great job. The new format was awesome, and the All Star game on Tuesday night was once again the Trout show. Just a quick little fact: it's 4 straight games where Trout has had a hit in the All Star game. His first at bat. You saw a single 4 years ago, then a double 3 years ago, a triple 2 years ago, and he had a home run on Tuesday. That's just crazy to think about. Now, just get into today's slate because, like we just said, it was the All-Star break, so we didn't see any game for the last 5 days. So that means that the MLB managers could basically select whatever pitcher they wanted to play for today and set their rotation as is. We already saw that happen with Clayton Kershaw was supposed to pitch today, but in fact it is Mike Bolsinger, and we'll get into that in a little bit. We do have a full slate. It is 15 games, and normally you would think that would be difficult from a pitching perspective, but today is actually kind of easy when you really think about it. The top guys for me are Jose Fernandez and Sonny Gray. I think you have to have Jose Fernandez, especially in cash games, head-to-heads and 50-50s today, simply because he's the best pitcher on the slate. He has the best matchup against the worst team in baseball in the Phillies. And the guy has really just been incredible. He has not walked anybody yet this season. His strikeouts are up. And honestly, and I don't say this lightly, he actually looks better since coming back from Tommy John. It's really incredible to watch. His slider's falling off the table. He's hitting 99 miles an hour on his 94th pitch like he did in his last start. He's really establishing himself as one of the best right-handed pitchers in baseball in the past 2 years. And honestly, he might have the best stuff at this point, which is really crazy to think about, just being a year removed from Tommy John surgery. The next guy I just mentioned was Sonny Gray, and obviously he's been one of the better pitchers in baseball this year. But I like the fact that he has a very good matchup against the Twins. And Gray is a very high strikeout guy, but he can work deep in the counts because he gets ahead of his hitters quickly, and it makes for a good play in cash and in tournaments. But those are 2 guys that everybody's going to have. So I want to talk about some cheaper options. First, the third guy that I would be using in cash, if not for Fernandez and Sonny Gray, is Lynn. I've talked about him before. He's a very safe pitcher. He's been very good of late. He throws a lot of fastballs, though. Sometimes that gets him into trouble. But the thing remains is he throws those fastballs a lot, and guys just really aren't getting the ball. They're not hitting the ball hard very much. And that's the reason why Lynn's been able to work deep in the games and makes him one of those safer pitchers. And I do like him today, simply as that third option. Now, after that, there really isn't too many to look for in terms of safety options. A lot of people have talked about James Shields against the Rockies today in the industry, but I'm not a fan of his because the Rockies still crush right-handed pitching. Now, they're not in Coors Field, so it's a bit different, but you have to still look at the fact that they really have a lot of hitters that can really hit right-handed pitching hard, so I can't necessarily do that with Shields, who has actually been a little bit worse at home this year, which is odd because it's Petco Park. But another one is Masahiro Tanaka. Obviously, I've talked about him in the past, but the thing that he has with his elbow issue is it's not a full tear, not even just above a slight tear in his elbow. He's been dealing with for a while. And the reason why I can't go with a guy like that in cash games is because that issue could flare up at any time, and it limits his movement. And a guy like that, he needs his movement to succeed. Now, there's 2 guys I do want to discuss, some cheaper options today. Of course, I'll be using Jose Fernandez, Sonny Gray, and Lynn, probably Fernandez and Gray. But there's cheaper guys that I do want to talk about that are some decent tournament plays. The first guy is Julio Teheran against the Chicago Cubs. Now, Teheran has not been very good this year, well, relative to his talent at least, with a 4.56 ERA. He's been very good of late, though, and the reason for that is because he's been throwing a lot more strikes and been able to use his secondary stuff deeper in counts and really get those strikeouts up and get a lot of ground balls. He's allowed 0 earned runs in just 2 of his last 4 starts. He had a decent start of 3 earned runs in there, and the other one he allowed 6 earned runs, but that seemed like an anomaly because a lot of balls were just falling that day. I believe it was against the Pirates. Now, Teheran faces the Cubs today, who have, if not the highest, one of the highest strikeout rates against right-handed pitching so far this season. And every time a pitcher like that faces the Cubs, I'm always intrigued because they're a young, free-swinging baseball team. You watch them play, they have a lot of guys that hack. And that's how they score runs, but that's also how they strike out a lot. A guy like Teheran has really electric stuff that could turn into a potential double-digit strikeout game that could really take you a long way in these tournaments. Now, he hasn't had a big strikeout game like that this year, but I don't think he's faced the Cubs yet either, who have one of the highest strikeout rates, as we've mentioned before. So The one thing why I do like him is the fact that he faces the Cubs and strike out a lot. But there's another number I found while researching him. Obviously, with the All Star break, all these pitchers have extra rest. And I went and looked at Teheran's performance last year on extra rest, and he was unbelievable, really. He had a 2.25 ERA with 9 strikeouts per 9, which was one strikeout an inning, on 6 or more days rest. Now he has that this year or for today's start, and it just shows that he's been better on more rest, and that's just another factor to add in today. On days where he had 5 days of rest last year, his ERA was about 2.6. So it shows that when he does get that extra rest, like a lot of pitchers, he performs a lot better. One reason why I like him in tournaments specifically is because he will be very low owned. A lot of people have Fernandez, especially on FanDuel and one-pitcher sites, and those people might be pivoting to a guy like Lynn or Sonny Gray or even a James Shields. But I think he will be very low owned, and he could make for a very good starting pitcher 1 or 2 on 2-pitcher sites simply because of that strikeout upside in tournaments. Now, I can't use him in cash simply because he hasn't been as good this year as you would like to see, but I still think his electric stuff and matchup against the Cubs makes for a good tournament option. The second and last guy I wanted to talk about is actually a guy I don't really like much as a pitcher, but he just has a great matchup, so I feel like he could be a decent low-owned tournament option, and that's Drew Hutchison against the Tampa Bay Rays. Seems like I'm beating a dead horse here, but I'm telling you, the right-handed pitchers against the Rays is really a big target to look for pretty much every day, as long as there's a decent right-handed pitcher on the mound. Now, like I just said, I don't like Hutchison much as a pitcher, but that matchup really gives him and a couple other factors gives him an edge to use as a cheap pitcher in a GPP. For some reason, Hutchison is one of these guys that you look at their home and away splits, and it just doesn't make sense. We talked about Shields struggling at Petco Park, and obviously you guys know by now that the Rogers Center, where Toronto plays, is one of the best hitters parks in baseball. Not when Hutchison pitches. It's weird. For some reason, he's been very good this year there. In 51 innings pitched, he has 50 strikeouts, which is a very good number. And he has just a 2.12 ERA and a 1.04 WHIP. That's really incredible, and it speaks volumes to the fact that at 51 innings, it's a pretty large sample size for somebody. And the fact that he does pitch well at home, maybe it's the way that his pitches fall up there in Toronto, or just the way the backdrop doesn't necessarily go along with his arm slot. But for whatever reason, he is successful up there. Now, of course, we talked about the Rays, who are one of the worst offenses in baseball. I think they may be the worst offense in baseball against right-handed pitching. They're hitting just 236. They don't have a very high WOBA or ISO, so they're not hitting the ball hard. And I think all those factors can probably make a pitcher like Hutchison, who once again, I tell you, I'm not a fan of as a pitcher. It makes for a good matchup, and sometimes that matchup's enough to make us like a pitcher. You got to remember, Hutchison's very cheap, so if you do go with him, you can fit almost any bat you want today, because on DraftKings, FanDuel, Fantasy Aces, a lot of different places have cheap prices for today. Whether that be the first day back to the All Star break, I don't know. So one cheap pitcher can let you get all the bats you want, and that's why I think Hutchison might be a decent starting pitcher too on 2-pitcher sites and tournaments. That pretty much wraps up our pitching segment. But just to recap, I do like Jose Fernandez. I will probably have him in every single cash lineup, and probably a lot of GPPs as well with that strikeout upside. I like Sonny Gray and Lynn as well, but I will have some Julio Teheran and maybe a few shares of Drew Hutchison tonight in tournament. Those are my thoughts on the slate for today, so be sure to later on keep in touch with RotoCurve's weather, as Danielle does a great job talking about the weather for each night. Make sure we don't have any issues for tonight, because that's the last thing you want, a goose egg because of the weather. Also, make sure to check out the RotoCurve lineups page when you look later in the day, because sometimes those lineups change, and that makes for a better matchup. Of course, if a guy like Mike Trout sits for someone like Efrain Navarro, that's really going to downgrade that Angels lineup. So stuff like that, just make sure you keep an eye on that for the rest of the day. That'll bring us to the end of the segment, and be sure to turn in tomorrow for the next edition of the MLB Lineup Picks Starting Pitcher Edition.